City Center Radio is episode 173, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Wednesday, September 20th, 2023. Happy to be back with you here on this Wednesday. Took Monday off, took a little break from the podcast. You know, I didn't really have a ton to talk about as I was getting stuff together on Sunday, getting ready to record, and had so much other work to do. So I said, you know what? Let's not push it. I don't have a ton of stories right now. I got so much more to do. So apologies for the unexpected break, but hopefully, wasn't too big of a deal. And I'm back with you today. So I appreciate you all understanding and just need a little break. But we've got two awesome episodes for you still this week. We got this one right here. I'm going to get you caught up on the big stories from the last handful of days. And then Friday, we got a big, fun episode, barring any changes in the schedule. I have an interview scheduled that will be on Friday's episode. Don't want to jinx it, just because every time I just feel like I preview something, someone's schedule gets messed up and things get postponed. So just keep an eye out on Friday. Should have a fun interview for you. That's related to an event that is upcoming, and you're not going to want to miss it. First, besides being busy with work, I haven't been doing too much, but one thing I will share, this past weekend on Saturday, I did go see Anthony Jeselnik, the stand-up comedian, at the Gilliard Center. I've seen a handful of events over the last few months, I feel like, at the Gilliard after not really going there all that often. It's a beautiful venue for those who have been inside the actual theater portion itself. Just really breathtaking, especially the ceiling. They've got that great design up there. But besides that, he's one of my favorite comedians, a little bit darker humor than some people may like, depending on how much you're into stand-up comedy and things. But he's a big name. He's had television shows, not like sitcoms. He had almost like a late night type show, where he was at a desk and did a couple skits and interviews and things like that. That was really good. He's got a podcast and has done others in the past. And anyway, just a really great show. I went with a friend of mine. We were both cracking up, just loved it. Just tons and tons of fun. So that is something I was able to do in town. I don't think I mentioned this actually also. A couple weeks ago, I did go to Jack's Cosmic Dogs that just opened on James Island. I've had them before, but it had been a really, really long time. And they reopened a location here in James Island. You may remember years ago, they were open where Bohemian Bull is currently. So they've been on the island before, but it had been several years. And it was, exactly what I remember. Just solid hot dog that I ordered. They've got fun toppings and things. And it was just like I remembered, really good. Prices were pretty good. You can also go in there. They have different things on the menu. They have some vegetarian options, as well as they have some beer that you can order. And I believe there's some dessert options as well. So it had been a little while, but it was nice to be back and having a familiar meal that I remember from years past here in Charleston. So if you're in that area, it's a good option if you're looking for a quick lunch or dinner or something. Just something you're not gonna have to wait too long for, and what you're getting. And again, they've from the one I had it before, and it was just as good as I remember. But there were some things on the menu. I don't know if they were new or I'm just not remembering them from when I had visited previously. But everything sounded really good. So again, just, I know it's hot dogs. So I know not everyone's like, oh yeah, I got to rush out and try that restaurant. We're not talking about a fancy sit down dinner, but if you're looking for something casual that is a decent price and, it's hard to be disappointed in the hot dog, and they do really good job. They have like quality ingredients and at least tasted that way to me. So I definitely recommend it. But yeah, that's about it. So enough of me rambling about what to eat if you're looking for hot dogs in Charleston. Let's get into the latest news. So we lost an $80 million military fighter jet. By we, I mean South Carolina, more specifically, Joint Base Charleston. It was hard to miss this story. I'm sure you at least caught the headlines, but yeah, a fighter jet went missing on Sunday. It was a difficult story to follow for multiple reasons. Number one, Joint Base Charleston, the military in general, they weren't exactly, I don't know if it's fair to say they weren't forthcoming with information. They may have their reasons, but they really weren't providing a heck of a lot of details about this incident. No, I'm not looking for anything, super intense or in the weeds when it comes to military, strategy. If they were doing some kind of testing and they don't want the details of that out, I get all that. But there was like no information at all. If you remember on Sunday, it was like, hey, there was some sort of mishap. That's what they keep calling it, a mishap, with a F-35 fighter jet. The pilot ejected or was ejected, depending on how you read that. Does that mean the pilot meant to? Was that part of the mishap? And that was kind of it. And so you just assume the plane crashed. And, so I saw the headline and the initial information, and details were kind of fuzzy. But then as time went on, you started to realize, wait, why aren't we hearing anything about recovery of this jet? Why aren't we hearing any more details? And then a little bit later on Sunday, Joint Base Charleston put out some tweets and press releases and things, and basically was just like saying the same thing, but added, so if you see a jet, it was like, wait, what do you mean? It was just so bizarre. You would think if a jet crashed, especially since supposedly the pilot ejected around North Charleston. Now, who even knows if that's accurate at this point? You're like, well, there's really nowhere it could go and crash without someone hearing something, seeing fire, smoke. It just didn't really make any sense to me. And I was like, okay, maybe it flew for a little while and it crashed in the ocean kind of far out. It just didn't really make a lot of sense. And again, there was not a lot of information coming out from officials that you could really make heads or tails of what was happening. And it got even more confusing on Monday when still no sign of this fighter jet. And of course, the rumor mill and the conspiracy theories start churning at that point. And so I try to block out all that. And I thought I found a really interesting and scary piece of information when Live 5 News spoke to Representative Nancy Mace about the situation. Representative Mace said, she's been trying to get answers. She's been on the phone with all sorts of people. I'm sure she was talking to folks in the federal government who were wondering, hey, what the heck's going on back in your home state? And she was also speaking to people at Joint Base Charleston and basically was griping that what I just said, they're really not giving us any information. But she went a step further and said, that they can't provide any answers. She almost made it seem like they just don't know. It wasn't so much they were being kind of cagey with the information, like, oh, we don't really want to tell too many details about this. Because again, military, they've got their secrets and their reasons for not wanting certain pieces of information out there. And I get that. But she made it seem like they don't even know what happened. They don't know where this fighter jet is. And then she had a quote that she said that they don't even know if it is crashed or if it is still flying. So I see that. I have never been in the military, and it just blows my mind. Wait a minute. What's happening here? There was a story where there was some kind of autopilot function that might have been turned on. So now I'm seeing a representative who, although didn't serve in the military, she did go to the Citadel, and she is a representative. She has access to certain pieces of information and details because she is a representative in in U.S. Congress. So myself, and I'm guessing Live 5 News, since they ran with the quote and put it in their headline that this jet could still be flying, I made the mistake of trusting Nancy Mace. That's a big mistake. And my second mistake was assuming Live 5 News had fact-checked her. Now, I don't want to make too much of a big deal out of this. This is, Live 5. I know folks who work there as well as other stations and the newspapers, et cetera, et cetera. They do a really great job. They do the best they can. And sometimes things slip through the crack. And so I shared that story. I was like, wait, excuse me, this thing could still be flying? Thankfully, a few people jumped in, including people who actually have experience flying, maybe not specifically this jet, but other military aircraft, saying that, no, there is no way that this thing is still flying almost 24 hours after the pilot ejected. people jumped in saying there's only X amount of hours this thing can fly as far as how much fuel it has. And although there were some variations, the general consensus from folks who seemed like they would be in the know of these types of things was that there's only a few hours of flight time. Some said 2 hours, some said 3 or 4 or whatever. So there's no way this thing is still in the air. So that just added more confusion to it when a representative is throwing stuff like that out there that, wait, this thing could still just be flying. The other thing that makes no sense is, regardless of if it crashed or was still flying, how is there no tracking information to have a general idea of where it crashed? And so that was there's just so many questions. And again, there's two main reasons for that. One, we're not getting a lot of information from officials at all. And number two, we have a representative who made kind of a flippant comment that was inaccurate, as well as, just like everything else on the internet, there's conspiracy theories, false information, people assuming things. And so it's just a confusing and bizarre 24-ish hours where there was really no answers of any kind and a lot of just speculation and questions, and it was wild. It's never boring here in South Carolina. Well, the plane has been located. So it was indeed discovered in Williamsburg County on Monday night. There was a debris field that was found, and they are very, basically certain that this is where the F-35 crashed. The area that it's in is about 2 hours northeast of the base, which is in North Charleston. So that aligns with what some of the people were saying about how much flight time it would have. And so 2 hours northeast of the base. So there is still, that is true then, that the plane was indeed flying on its own for quite a bit of time. Now, when it says 2 hours northeast of the base, who knows, how fast, obviously, planes in general can go. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it flew for 2 hours straight. It would have been a lot further out. So it did fly for, we'll see, I guess, for a little bit without the pilot. So there's still some questions there. Was there some kind of autopilot function that was put on? Is that part of the mishap? What exactly happened? And we just don't know. So Joint Base Charleston came out with a statement saying that the mishap is currently under investigation, and we are unable to provide additional details to preserve the integrity of the investigative process. So they're not talking, claiming that they don't want to give away anything as far as their investigation, which, okay, maybe. So it's really concerning that something like this could have happened. Thankfully, it crashed somewhere where it does not appear anyone was injured or that any structures were damaged. But even that's not 100% known because the media isn't able to get really that close to the area. So maybe by the time this podcast comes out on Wednesday, we'll have some more details. But as of this recording on Tuesday, that's really all we've got. Really bizarre situation. Again, scary, because imagine something like this where the plane went down in a residential neighborhood or who knows. So all things considered, it seems that we've avoided a huge catastrophe, which obviously we're all thankful for. But there is still a lot of questions that hopefully we'll actually get some answers to. Now we've got an update to a story that I think the last time I talked about it was over a year ago. But we finally have a resolution involving soon to be the former mayor of North Charleston, Key Summy. He announced his retirement. So there will be a new mayor in North Charleston. He's still currently the mayor, but we have an update on the situation involving him and some accusations against him. The North Charleston City Council voted to settle a federal lawsuit that was filed by a former city employee who accused the mayor of creating a hostile work environment and making sexual advances. This past Thursday, the city council voted 6-2 to settle the case that was brought by former employee Delisa Reynolds. The council agreed to a settlement of $180,000. Now, of that total, $130,000 will come from the city, while $50,000 will come from the South Carolina Insurance Reserve Fund. So, for those who don't remember, Reynolds accused Summy of, quote, a long-standing culture of abuse of power, end quote, That was according to the filings, in the lawsuit, which also originally stated that Summy had inappropriate sexual contact with Reynolds and other female employees. After filing the complaint in February of last year, Reynolds said in a press release that she did not believe the city of North Charleston was taking her complaint seriously, and that's why she decided to get the press involved. And that's when I heard about it and talked about it here on this podcast. This story comes from Live 5 News. They say council members had no public discussion about the settlement, and Mayor Keith Summy was not in attendance at the meeting. Jerome Hayward and Virginia Jameson, both council members, were the only ones to vote no against settling this case. Officials with the city of North Charleston did not respond to a request from comment from Live 5 News. I've checked other news organizations just to see. Again, as of this recording, there's been no official statement from the city or from Mayor Summy. I would be surprised if that changes. Usually these are things that they're like, all right, let's just, we settled. This is over. Let's never talk about it again. So I'd be surprised, especially Mayor Summy. And there may be terms to this settlement that we don't know about either as far as what can and can't be said. So we do have a resolution of sorts to that story from over a year ago. So cities decided to settle, not going into a court case. Read into that whatever you will, because that's all we can do when, there's not an actual court case with facts and evidence and all that kind of stuff. But $180,000 settlement is the top line here to this story. And lastly, South Carolina's abortion providers are not giving up on trying to make changes to what is essentially an all-out abortion ban in the state. They have filed a new lawsuit challenging the state's 6-week abortion ban. This comes 3 weeks after the all-male state Supreme Court upheld the law signed by the governor in May. You may remember, once Roe v. Wade was overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court, South Carolina's 6-week abortion ban went into effect. It was immediately challenged, was put on hold until the challenge could be resolved. The Supreme Court here in the state originally said that it was unconstitutional. It invaded people's privacy, and that was that. However, this state wanted to ban abortion so badly, the governor made it a priority, told the House and the Senate here in the state, get it done. They made some minor changes, nothing that anyone really saw that changed this whole privacy aspect. So there really was no reason to expect there'd be a different result. Well, there was an all-male state Supreme Court now, the only state Supreme Court in this country that is entirely made up of men, because the one woman on the court had retired and was replaced by a man. With this one new person, they decided to uphold the law. We've talked about that previously. Abortion providers challenged that, and it was originally shot down, and we'll get into that in a minute. But this new challenge, they are arguing that this whole act is ambiguous as to when, during a pregnancy, the legal limit goes into effect. The law, which we've talked about before, is called the Fetal Heartbeat and Protection from Abortion Act. It has been widely assumed to ban abortions performed after 6 weeks of pregnancy, which is the point at which electrical impulses can be detected in the embryo. But it's that wording of the law that makes it all confusing. It does not specify specifically which week of pregnancy that ban begins, but instead refers to this point at which a fetal heartbeat can be detected. And we've talked about that neither of those words work, because what the lawmakers, their intent was 6 weeks, which is not a fetus, so fetal doesn't work. It is not a heartbeat. It's just electrical impulses. There's not actually a heart there. And so if that's what they mean, the term is wrong. And if they mean fetal heartbeat, well, then that would be later on in the pregnancy. So it's confusing, and abortion providers aren't entirely sure what exactly the intent of the law is. I think we can make assumptions, but they're right. The wording isn't right, and it needs to be, regardless of how you feel about the abortion ban. It needs to be medically accurate if you're going to be potentially charging people with felonies, fining, et cetera, et cetera. In their September 14th filing, the providers have asked the High Court to take up the case directly, which would bypass the lower courts. They've also asked the rule that the ban takes effect at 9 weeks of pregnancy when a heart forms. So they want this to be more medically accurate. Hey, the heart actually forms around 9 weeks. So let's say the abortion ban is now 9 weeks instead of 6. As I mentioned back in August, the state Supreme Court ruled on a 4-1 majority that the law did not constitute an unreasonable violation of the constitutionally protected right to privacy, but several of the justices did raise concerns about when the bans could go into effect. So even though they changed their mind, despite there really not being any big changes to the law, they did say, hey, but there is still some confusion here. Specifically, Justice John Kittredge wrote in a footnote of his majority opinion that, quote, we leave for another day, end quote, the exact point at which the ban takes effect. So they're basically like, hey, we're cool with this. This isn't unreasonable violation of privacy, but you might want to look into some of these details because they don't seem particularly accurate. Now, abortion providers had raised similar concerns in a motion asking the court to reconsider the August 23rd ruling, but the court's majority rejected that request. Kittredge did signal, though, that in the original ruling, he believed the issue needed to be resolved by a separate challenge. So even though they rejected it when it was brought directly to them, they did say, hey, this needs to be a separate challenge. We're rejecting this request only for that reason. At least that was the expectation based on what was written. So it's not a done deal. It is possible that this new filing, since it is now separate, could lead to them revisiting this law and actually making it medically accurate. Now, that could mean they just change the wording so it stays at 6 weeks, or maybe they will go ahead with this 9-week ban. So we'll see how this all plays out. Obviously, a long way to go with this whole thing, but right now, the abortion ban in South Carolina is still in effect. It's still this 6-week mark. So just know that's where we're at right now. We'll see if the challenge decides to be taken up. We'll see if if there's a ruling let's revert back to Roe v. Wade time while we try to figure this out, or if they say, hey, keep going with this 6-week thing while we decide, if this needs to change to 9 weeks or if wording needs to change. So don't expect any earth-shattering news from this, like all of a sudden the abortion ban's overturned or anything. But there could be some changes coming based on this. And again, even though I don't think anyone actually thinks this is going to lead to going back to how it was prior to Roe v. Wade being overturned, even if you hate a law, if it's going to be in effect, it needs to be accurate. It needs to be clear so that both the police, authorities, and the public know what is and is not okay as far as the law is concerned. So it is important, even if it seems frustrating, who cares, whether it's 6 weeks or 9 weeks, or if they change the wording, it's still going to be 6 weeks. But it is important that they're doing this and that everything is as clear as can be. All right, that'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. Thank you for joining me. Remember, Friday we have an interview that is planned. It should be a lot of fun. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss that episode or any future ones. If you want to help out, you can also rate and review the podcast. Go to holycitycenter.com/shop to pick up merchandise, or sign up for a support tier at patreon.com/holycitycenter. I want to thank Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Sound System for producing this episode, and Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every episode. Quick footnote, recording this before the River Dogs game on Tuesday night. If they won that game, they will have won the Carolina League Championship for the 3rd straight year. I'll be sure to update you on Friday's podcast if they won, or if a Game 3, and it is a best-of-3 series, so that would be winner take all at that point. I'll let you know if that's what happens instead. Hopefully it'll be a River Dogs victory, especially since they're playing at home, although Game 3 will also be in Charleston. So that's another, just letting you know, again, recorded it before. So if they won and the celebrations are going, that's why we didn't talk about it on this episode. So check back in on Friday for updates on that, other stories, and hopefully a fun interview. Until then, though, good night and good luck.